Hey, Vince, there you go.
Thank
Go
you.
again.
Welcome back to the Metaplanet Dojo, Discord episode number 2. Short first, moon later. Are we all here? Climb, are you here?
Definitely.
Yes. How? I know we can't see your face, but let me know, man. Were you dancing a little bit behind your screen there?
I was trying not to.
Yeah. So Welcome everybody. We're here for another round. Obviously, there's a lot of things happening. Right before we went on air, there's been a few buys. Another buy announced. I'm sure everybody's aware. The stock is pumping right now. I think we're at 1770. Let's get going. Let's get going. I hear, looking at the audience, I hear that everybody's like asking for the music and the art and everything. So let me go through that a little bit. So the art is by Mike, and I will show his X account in a little bit. He's also in the Discord, create artist. The video montage is done by me, and then I also put the song on it, and I do all the After Effects and everything. So it takes me a few hours, but it's worth my time because apparently a lot of people like it. I will put the name of the beat in the description because I know a lot of people are asking for it. By the way, we got a lot permission from all these artists to use their beats and to feature them on here, and we're excited to do so. We're excited. So thank you. Let's move on. Okay, there's been a couple of things to go through. Yeah, everybody in the audience, let us know where you're tuning in from, what time it is over there, where you're tuning from, and then we'll give you a shout out. Episode number 2, disclaimers, the boring stuff. Let's get it out of the way. This is not financial advice. Anything you hear on this podcast is financial entertainment. It's fun. We just build models. We go through models, sheets. We build them. We destroy them. We talk about them. We debate them. That's what we do here. Okay. We receive no compensation from Metaplanet other than the shares that we bought ourselves with our own money. That's it. We are not seeking any YouTube monetization or sponsors. There's been a little change from last time. Climbs X, he turned on his monetization, and that is just to pay for some of the fees that the dojo incurs. Like we have to host the clock app, the web app online, and it allows us to actually buy a third seat right here in this podcast. So you can't see him, but Mr. Bork, the Botto Master, is in the audience. No, not in the audience. He's here with us backstage, right? You just can't see him. He's moderating the chat. He's making sure everybody's behaving. If you guys don't behave, you folks don't behave, he's gonna swing that hammer. Let you know. So thank you, Borg. Thank you for being out here. He'll also be monitoring the chat and boosting the comments so we can take questions from the audience or feature some answers. Yeah, I see people. Let's see. People from Taiwan. 你好吗? Taiwan, Gotham City. I don't believe you. Hawaii. Hello from Hawaii. Clearwater, Florida. I used to be there. I lived there for a few years. Awesome. Best beaches. Sydney, Australia. Great. Shanghai. Awesome. So we got people from all over the world. New York City, SoCal, East Coast. Yes. Vancouver, Alabama, Southern Colombia. Awesome. I know Jake is probably in Japan right now. So we got Japan in the house too. Burbank. All right. Delhi, Montreal. All right. We're global. I get it. This is global. Metaplanet is going global, right? This is not just like a tiny stock anymore that nobody can buy. This is global. Thank you all for tuning in. Yep. Mr. Voyager dropped the Metaplanet Dojo Discord. So any of you tuning in that want to join Discord and get some live conversation, join in. Okay, I mentioned Mike earlier for the intro art. That's him on here. That's his X profile. 10,000 BTC, Jake. Yes. So please give him follow on X. He makes fire art. He handles Midjourney like no other. So please do so. All right. Climb, do you have any opening words? Sorry, here I talked for a minute.
No, it's just kind of funny getting prepped for this. I didn't even see, but enough people have said it. I trust that it's true that they actually hit 10,000, that they bought the remainder, and they're at 10,000 now. So that's pretty cool.
Wow. Yeah.
10,000 Bitcoin.
Yeah. So I guess they front ran our episode, huh?
Yeah.
All right. So we got a few things to talk about, new stuff. So new intro, new art. We have a new microphone here. I'm hoping my voice sounds a little bit better than last time and I come out a little bit clearer. New microphone. We got an extra seat backstage for the staff, and that's it right now. Like we're happy. Let's go. Let's get going. We got a lot to go through today. Okay. The main topics for today are going to be, I really want to drive down the point. Climb and I really want to talk about EVO Fund in 2020 Ventures because there seems to be a lot of misunderstanding out there as to what's happening. behind the scenes. So we'll go over that, the internal market making engine that's being ran. I'd like to talk about short selling mechanics. For those of you who are unaware, people who short stocks are probably know this stuff already. We'll go through the warrants again, market making twice. Didn't edit that out of the slide. How have prior rounds of stock acquisition rights unfolded? We'll go through the potential scenarios. We actually drafted those before the buy was announced, or the bond was announced today. So we'll see, and then we'll go through the new announcements by Metaplanet and go through the 555 million share plan model again. Okay. All right, and Climb, feel free to interject and anytime here, because I know I set up these slides. So EVO Fund. We've seen a lot of comments going around social media saying, EVO shorting, that's not good. Like the shorts are on us, they're prying on us. I'm like, So EVO is a Cayman Island incorporated company. They've been around for a while now. This is the CEO, President Michael Lurch here standing next to Simon. And he looks like pretty darn strong. Climb, would you like to wrestle him?
No, I don't think that would go too well for me.
Okay, yeah. So yeah, don't mess with Michael, okay? He this is on this website here, you can see what they're holding. So they're basically a huge hedge fund. And they buy and sell, and they buy and sell stocks, and they specialize also in the warrants. So which is basically why they also partnered up with Metaplanet. We'll see why. Okay, so backtrack a little bit. Last week, when we were in between, 2 weeks ago, we were in between two rounds of stock acquisition rights. I posted on X. I'm like, I think that they're going to take their own stock, EVO, because they have 19 million shares, and they're going to sell those between now and June 24th, and potentially take the money, come back around, and give it up to Metaplanet in the form of a bond. And then Mr. Stonking guy down here replied to my comment and said, EVO can borrow more shares starting June 9th to bridge the gap to the next SAR. And he posted a screenshot of the disclosure. That actually got Climb and us thinking and going back and do some more research, because we obviously missed a detail. Climb, would you like to give a few words to Stonking guy?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. And first on that detail, we had speculated. We didn't want to really say it. I don't think during episode 1 about the 30 million shares, because I had my doubts about what that meant in the bottom left there. But obviously, we figured things out now. And Stonking guy is actually the reason that I'm in Metaplanet. Not to say I wouldn't have found it a day or a week later or something like that, but I knew about it. It wasn't on my radar. And I thought they were, still a crazy valuation, and I hadn't done my research at all. So he pointed it out just randomly on somebody's post. I don't remember whose, and yeah, he's the reason I pulled the trigger.
Yeah, so Stonking guy, if you're in the audience, thank you, good job, your claim to fame.
That's right.
So this is the slide. If you remember from the first episode, this is the slide with the 30 million shares being mentioned down here, right? Okay,
Exactly.
so we had missed that detail. So we saw it, we just didn't know how to put it in context. So all of that changes everything. Okay, on this slide here, what Climb and I would like to point out is that this is a Bloomberg terminal, the list of the top 10 shareholders of Metaplanet. Number 1 is 2020 Ventures. So who's 2020? They had at the time, April 18th here, you can see 42 million shares. So they're incorporated in British Virgin Islands, and they're basically an investment vehicle focused on Bitcoin, crypto, and lending. Mr. Simon holds the majority of the voting rights. You'll see that disclosed on the bottom right here in that little box. They're indirect voting rights, and they floated a loan to Metaplanet early on in their Bitcoin treasury days. Bottom left here, you can see that actually any decisions regarding Metaplanet are made without Simon's involvement. Like he's recusing himself from those decisions so as not to cause a conflict of interest. So interesting to see. Next, I want to talk a little bit about short selling mechanics, short selling stocks. So funny enough, like on the right side, I found my trading journal, like from when I was shorting small cap stocks, and those are some of my trades here, my entries, exit. Climb, did you ever short stocks? Is that something that you did previously?
No, I think that I did with GameStop sometime within the last year. I don't remember when, and I had some luck, but it was kind of just a quick, 20% move or something like that, and I closed it, and that's it.
That was like only time you shorted, basically.
That's the only time I've ever shorted.
Okay, interesting. Okay, yeah. So, yeah, I think you and I we prefer options now. Like,
Yeah, I like limited risk and unlimited upside. Sounds a lot better than the inverse of that.
yeah. So let me dive. There's a point I want to drive home here with the short selling mechanics. So for those who are unaware, we'll have a little crash course. So outstanding shares is number of shares issued held by shareholders. The float is the number of shares that's available for trading. So it's going to be less than the outstanding shares. In the US, it's publicly disclosed, but in Japan, I think it's hard to get a hold of these numbers. The short interest is the percentage of the float being shorted. So we'll see how that's relevant to Metaplanet too. Locates, that's like a slang we use in that um, environment to designate borrowed shares. And then HTB, hard to borrow. We're not going to use that later on, but I just wanted to point that to you. And then we can get float compression too when too many shares are being shorted at once. Okay, so quick overview of short selling mechanics, like what basically, if you sell short stocks or what EVO could be doing. If you want to go short a stock, you don't own a share, you have nothing to sell, so you have to actually pay a fee to borrow a share from the broker. So you pay a fee, borrow the share, you sell the share on the open market, and now you have a short position. Hopefully the stock tanks. After that, you'll be buying back a share from the open market for less, so you'll profit that difference, and then you'll take that share, turn it around, and then give it back to the lender. Okay, so for those of you who have brokerages account where you have stock lending enabled, and you have a notification that ding, your shares are being lent for interest to somebody. That's maybe like somebody shorting the stock on the other. They're borrowing that share from you and then shorting the stock on the other end. And this is important because it's called borrower locate. There's a borrower going on. Okay. So, Climb, you want to talk about the work we did here on this Japan Exchange Group website?
Yeah, and just like a real quick word too on the Dojo Discord.
Yeah.
A lot of this stuff, like there's so many minds in there. There's so many people brainstorming, asking interesting questions, and then willing to do the research. So like a lot of this stuff that we bring up in the podcast, it would probably be like too hard to try to figure out where we first heard, where we first got the link to websites like this or whatever.
Yeah.
But just a huge shout out to everyone that helps. Like tons of people are curious, but the people that actually like dig through and really provide this stuff for us to take the next step and dig through even further, it's super valuable.
Yeah, actually.
So yeah.
Go ahead. Sorry.
Oh, go ahead. Yeah.
Yeah, I wanted to take a minute just to thank, I think, this Mark Reamer that I follow on X. He keeps an eye on the short interest, and then there's also Boys Meta. So he also keeps an eye on the short interest. I think he had a long thread on EVO as well, which is very important, because there's a lot of information like flying around here. But yeah, thank you to all the Discord, everybody putting their minds together and discussing this, because the more eyes there are, the better we can figure this out and come to a consensus. But yeah, go ahead.
Yeah. So yeah, this website is fantastic. Every day they release updated short data, but it's not as clean as it may sound. So like I had to go back like 3 months or so with daily data, and like it took me a few hours to just build and like we worked on it together, and we built everything kind of for this episode, and so that we could just kind of keep track of it going forward. But if somebody doesn't change their short position, their amount of shares shorted, then there's no update. So like if somebody shorted 5% of the stock in December and like hasn't budged either way, hasn't changed, one single share, then you won't find them in any of this daily short data. It's only for the changes that might be aggregated somewhere else on this website, but I'm not really like, I wasn't able to find it. We weren't able to find it.
Yeah.
So, it's basically just go back as far as you can and hope that nobody like shorted it before that date that hasn't changed it. So I think we went back to like February or something like that, maybe January.
Okay, February is where we stopped. Yeah. So the JPX is basically the NYSE of Japan, and they have to, the companies are obligated to report their changes in short positions this way. So Climb and I went and dug through the data, and we found that EVO's position, interestingly enough, EVO started or reported a change in short positions starting, I think 6, 9, 10, June 9, 10, 11, I believe. Climb, is that right? Yeah, there we go.
That's right.
Yeah. So the first position was announced for 13 million shares, the second for 23 million, and then 26 million. So, go back to that slide where they talked about being allowed 30 million shares. They're basically almost unloaded the full clip there at 26 million, and we haven't seen a change since. So we'll keep an eye on that going forward with Climb.
And that yeah, and that daily, I forgot to say too, the daily spreadsheets that come out for any change in short data. One, people only have to report if they're short 0.5% or more, and then two, let's see, sometimes it lags by a couple of days. Like people may not, I'm assuming it's just, the companies may not report that they shorted stock until, 2 or 3 days later. So it's possible that they already sold all 30 million shares like as of Friday, as far as I'm concerned. If not, I would expect today. There's no reason they wouldn't sell the rest of it today.
Yeah. So we'll see then on Monday. We'll see after today, see what happens after the close of the market in a few hours.
Yes.
Okay. Okay, so Climb kindly, took in all that data, crunched it together, and then looking at the short percentage. Usually in the States we look at short as a percentage of the float, but the float, as I understand, is not really readily available in Japan. So we just go by outstanding shares. So all the total short positions on average against outstanding shares total out to be 10%. You can see at the very end here, like the big blue line shooting up, that's EVO reporting their shorts. So we estimate the float on Metaplanet to be about 300 million shares out of 600 million outstanding. So if you want to calculate short interest, just multiply this by 2. So historically, maybe short interest like 20, 21%. And now maybe close to 30% with EVO, doing their thing in there. Okay.
Yeah, it's great being able to track this. So
it's great. So Climb here, put all the institutions together, and you can see most of them are about constant here, and then just EVO's position shooting up on the very, very right here in the dark green, shooting up. That's EVO. So obviously something's going on. So when this happens, a lot of people, I see a lot of chatter on X. We're being shorted. It's not good. Stock's going to go down, but it's not completely true. It's we'll put 2 and 2 together here after we review the warrant mechanics. You want to talk about the warrant Climb war?
Yeah, you actually may be better at it because it's so closely related to
Okay.
shorting.
Let's walk through the warrant. So shout outs to Benny, by the way, Benny Big Bags on X, Benny on the Discord. He made this little graphic here. We were about to make one with Climb, and then he showed it to us. We're like, oh, well, let's not reinvent the flywheel if there's already a flywheel out there. So remember the slide we looked at with 2020 Ventures being the largest shareholder of Metaplanet? So they're the ones basically holding the war chest for EVO, 30 million shares allocated to them. So EVO, when they need to short the stock Metaplanet, they go and borrow the shares from 2020 there, and then they sell those shares on the open market, right? Just like shorting we talked about earlier. Now, and this is the difference. If you're shorting a stock on the regular and you just sell and you have to buy back to exit, then if the stock shoots up against your entry, your position, then you may be in the red and you may be hurt a little bit. EVO has a guaranteed exit in the form of a warrant. So a warrant is a right that they can exercise to create a new share, and they pay to create a new share, and basically, Metaplanet gives them the new share. It's dilutive because it adds to the share count. So that's their guaranteed exit. They can exercise that warrant and basically have a guaranteed profits. Even if the stock shoots up past their entry, they can still exit at the strike price of the warrant. Then once they get those shares in hand, they just give them back. They turn around and give it back to 2020. And when they pay to exercise the warrants, then Metaplanet got the money from EVO that way, and then Metaplanet can come around and execute the Bitcoin buy. So it's pretty ingenious way, Climb. What do you think?
Yeah, it's really neat. I mean, like 2020 Ventures is always kind of lending the older shares that they've been holding on to, and to EVO. EVO shorts them on the market, like you said, and then exercises the warrants. In this case, their day one. Let's see, June 24th, they're able to exercise at the 1388 yen if they
Right.
exercise a Series 20 warrant.
Yeah.
I think they'll probably exercise a 21 or 22 warrant, a Series 21 or 22, which has like a 1 or 2% kicker, just because they have quite a bit of spread, so it probably makes sense to exercise something that gives them a little bit of a disadvantage now, which will give them an advantage to the future, making it where they can short even if we're only 1 or 2% above the sort of
That's right.
3-day average. So
Yeah,
it's weird to think about. It's kind of speculation, but we'll see how that goes.
yeah. We'll see that in the chart too. Like I'm gonna show this. I think it's not yet. Okay, not yet. Okay, so, and this is all, by the way, like all of this is like found in openly. Like none of us are getting like extra information, like that secret information nobody has access to, like insider information. All of this is found in the disclosures. If you take your time and read the disclosures, you'll find that they're putting all their play out there. They're very transparent, and you can learn a lot just from reading those. So the statement here says that EVO is participating as pure investment. They don't intend to hold the shares acquired through the exercise on a long-term basis, that they would sell the acquired shares in stages in the market in tranches, and they have verbally confirmed that they'll be mindful of market impact. This is pretty interesting, because to me, that statement says like it's not a legal contract. Like it's like, hey, thou shall not short below the strike. It's like it's really an alliance, right? Like a verbal contract. It's a verbal agreement. Say, hey man, like here's the warrants. Here's your guaranteed exits for your shorts. Don't short too hard. Don't nuke the mNAV, bro. And basically, yeah, bro, I got it. That's all there is. It's a trust relationship. And here at the bottom is Stonking Guy reminding that the agreement started on June 9th to borrow the shares. Coincidentally enough, Dylan on June 9th took to X and posted 555 is go, go, go. So, Klein, what do you think?
Yeah, it's neat. So if you think about like the little timeline of this, I think it was June 6th was when the 555 plan was announced. Then you see the dates there, like you just pointed out. June 9th is when the ability to borrow 30 million shares began, essentially. And
Yep.
we saw, June 9th was the first day, and they went in heavy, with what, 10 or 13 million shares sold to the market or something like that. Now, if you think back to May, the first 11 trading days of May, they sold 101 million shares, and this is a 555 million plan that some people are still in disbelief about 6 months being a real time frame that they could sell all these shares. When 11 trading days from May 1st to May 19th, they sold over 100 million shares, and it's before those shares were sold at lower prices. Now we're at higher prices, and it's amazing that they're able to keep up the volume numbers and how much they're able to sell to the market of these new shares, essentially. And the market is eating it up. And to me, that is just saying like the market is like, no, you're ready to be a bigger company now. And so it's a repricing, but for me, it works better to think of it like a resizing. There's way too much action happening at this level of market cap. And that's like historically when I've traded stocks, I would see that a lot. And if I would see that, like, and it wasn't just like a hot stock, like people were just going crazy over it for like a few days. If it was a sustained sort of excitement, then that really just meant the thing's going higher, most likely. And so that's how I think about it.
Okay, great. Thanks. Thanks for that. So let me. I saw a question from the audience here. I think Richard was asking why does EVO have so many warrants to execute? And they're basically, think of like when the stock shoots up, Metaplanet shoots up 3350. When it shoots up and the premium to the NAV, so the mNAV shoots up, meaning they're trading at 2 or 3 times the value of the Bitcoin on the balance sheet. Or the Metaplanet like 7 or 8 times, right? We have to. That's the part of the flywheel. You have to harvest that gap. You need to basically sell some of that premium. Metaplanet needs to sell some of that premium in order to make money and go and buy more Bitcoin to keep the whole thing going. And they can't do that themselves. So that's why they partner up with EVO and they give them the moving strike warrants. They give them the warrants so they can, EVO can basically have a guarantee they can short the stock. And then when they exercise the warrant, they pay the money to Metaplanet and then in return get the share. So Metaplanet, if you look at this chart here, Metaplanet gets paid the green area, right? So that's the strike price of the warrant, for example, the green area, and then EVO makes the yellow area here, and then the total sale price would be, let's say that this chart is now outdated because the stock is like shot up to 1770 right now. So this is from Friday close, but let's say on average EVO it would be selling at the top of the yellow square, right, at market price. They'd be shorting there and then be exercising the warrant to exit the trade and then basically collect that green part and then pay that to Metaplanet. So they get paid the yellow and the green by shorting, and then they turn around and give the green to Metaplanet and get a share in exchange. They take that share, give it back to 2020 to close out the short position, and then they keep the yellow part. Right? Hope that makes
Yeah,
sense?
that's awesome. Yeah, and right now it's kind of I consider it the most lucrative time for EVO is these 30 million shares, and think of that just as a percentage of that 555 million, because that's what it is. They just can't exercise them until day one, like June 24th, I believe. But so they're already going to be a little over 5% of the way into this plan, like day one of the plan, essentially.
That's crazy.
Which is like anything that they can do to pull the future forward and also to harvest like the mNAV. Let's say it's around 7. It's probably higher today, but they've already sold most of these 30 million shares. The exercise price on day one of the warrants, it will become a 3-day closing average, but day one it's 1388 yen, or slightly higher if it's series 21 or 22. But that's like the most, like, I consider it the most profitable time for EVO is these first 30 million shares.
Yeah.
Because the market just is like, the market's ready. The market's ready to go. The market's like, why does it have to be June 24th? Why can't it be today? Right. So
right. So that's a good point. Like we, when the last round finished and before this new round started, everybody was like, most of the people who don't follow the stock, like are like, oh, okay, well, there goes that. Like nothing's happening until June 24th. But if you if you dig through disclosures, if you put 2 and 2 together, like Dylan saying like June 9th, go, 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 they're dropping clues that, they, this is what I think of Metaplanet. Like they love to drop clues. They can't, there's things they can't say openly. They can't come out and say, all right, EVO is starting their shorts. They're going to collect this much money. We're going to buy them. Like they'd get front ran too. So the best they can do is disclose as much as they can in disclosure. And on the back end, maybe drop like some subtle cues on X or social media, like Simon dropping the 8 ball, for 8888. I think Simon saying go, go, go on June. We said that on June 8th on a Sunday that go, go, go means go, like buy more. And he said that the next day on June 9th, which coincides with the start of EVO being allocated there's 30 million shares. So yeah, just to follow up with this graph here, the two red lines I have, between June 9th and 24th, we thought nothing was going to happen, right? We thought, oh, they're in between two rounds, so the stock's going to maybe go sideways and stuff. No, EVO goes to work. EVO goes to work, and they went hard. Like they shorted 26 million shares, as Klein pointed out. Assuming they exercise SAR 20, Series 20, that's if they do a full clip. We did this before they announced the bond, like today. If they did full clip, would be about 280, 290 million dollars, which would in turn be about 2,500 to 2,900 BTC. So, what do you think, Klein? Were we like in a good range or no?
Yeah, everything's looking really good right now. Someone just posted that it's obviously I'm not looking at my phone right now, but it's 1,800 yen, which, when we got in the stock late April, I think the all-time high was I want to say it was like 750 or 760 or something like that.
Yeah.
And it's really neat. Every time they provide yield, it's a little weird if people don't have their mind wrapped around the mNAV stuff, and I'm still trying to conceptualize things better in my head too, but the whole mNAV scale shifts every time they provide yield. So if they provide 20% yield, the whole, the 1 mNAV price shifts up by 20%. The 5 mNAV price shifts up by 20%. The whole scale shifts up. And then if you think of that whole scale shifting higher, and then Metaplanet's price, let's just say it stayed flat, then it would be actually a lower mNAV. Because the whole scale shifted up against it, right? So it's really neat. I mean, I haven't calculated how much now that they're at 10,000 Bitcoin. But another quick thing, how much yield that is, but it's certainly over 10%. I think once you take everything into account. And then they just announced the 210 million bond too, which we'll talk about.
Yeah.
One other quick thing is early May, I think I had a model. It was actually probably closer to mid-May, but I had a model that was showing that I thought that they would hit 10,000 Bitcoin July 16th. And they just front ran me by a month and a day. And I thought that was an aggressive model. And, at the time, some people were like, yeah, no, that's their end of year target. Some people were calling me crazy. It's like, okay, well, Metaplanet just blew my, somewhat aggressive looking estimation out of the water.
You got to be more aggressive, Klein.
Yeah, I guess so. We'll talk about that a little bit later in this episode, I guess.
Speaking of aggression, there's a little detail we haven't talked about too. Oh, we mentioned it earlier, but that's not even priced in here. Is that EVO still has a little war chest of their own of 19 million shares of Metaplanet, and I don't know what the cost basis of these are. They may have acquired those through previous warrants or been holding on to them for a while, and I don't know. So we'll speculate about these in a little bit. But this chart kind of sums it up. I think with Climb 2 that given the current stock action, and they can't exercise yet, but come the 24th, I think I'm in line with him. Like, you would be more inclined to exercise the series 21 or 22, so that way you kind of bake in. They still bake in a good 10% more spread, maybe more if we go much higher than this between now and then. So yeah, 10%. So we'll see which ones they exercise. I don't know if they can exercise any series, but it'd be cool if they can just profit from the 21 and 22 series first. Okay, let's go. Okay, so all of this is to drive home this point right here. Like everything we've talked about for the last 30 minutes here is to drive this point. So let me put it in Japanese, medieval, Japanese things. Okay, history. Like if we see Metaplanet being depicted as like a samurai in a lot of fan art, going out there as like a samurai, buying Bitcoin or slashing Bitcoin, whatever, slashing fiat. If Metaplanet is a samurai, and they have the share inventory, they issue the shares, they buy the Bitcoin, and then they have also the ability to stop the warrant engine. They can throttle it down if things go out of hand. If Metaplanet is a samurai, then EVO is the ninja. So all fighting the same battle, right? Samurai goes out by day and acts by day, and noble standing visible in the front. Ninjas act at night under the cover of the night in the shadows. So EVO, on the back end, they borrow the shares from 2020 at a very actually at 0%. I think at 0%. They have no borrow risk. So remember what we said when if you short a stock and if you short a stock, and it rockets against you, then you could be hurting. You could be buying back at a higher price. There's a situation too where when you short a stock and then the guy that you borrowed your shares from calls the shares back in. Like it's they're like, oh no, we ending the borrow agreement. So now you're stuck. Like, what if your trade wasn't in profit yet? You have to like buy back and exit the trade, right, to give the share back to the lender. They're being called in. So because 2020 controls that, EVO has no risk. EVO has no borrow risk. It's almost risk free via the warrant reload. There's 30 million shares sitting pretty for them for the next 2 years. And they can also, we'll see that in the later slide, like take that money and then just kind of turn around and give it to Metaplanet in the form of a bond ahead of time, front running the whole operation. So EVO is a ninja. 2020, they have the war chest, 30 million shares. They can control it. They like no lending fees, and they manage the borrow window. Like they're not going to do it on unfavorable terms for EVO. They're going to give him favorable terms. Like EVO has no risk of like the shares being called in. So 2020 is like the treasurer, right? The Onmyoji just running the battle behind the scene. So little analogy I wanted to come up with. Okay, any points on this?
Just one thing I sort of thought about during this stream is that I think what we're seeing now is as Metaplanet gets larger, higher market cap, higher price per share, whatever, you see now that they're negotiating better terms. We saw that with Series 21 and Series 22, the 1% and 2% kicker, above the 3-day closing average price, right? So with that, like they're going to continue to get more leverage. Neither company wants to screw the other one. They're both like it's a very symbiotic relationship. And again, going back to May, like tons of other companies want to be in EVO's position. That's like super clear. So anyone that's like, oh, it's single man risk with EVO as a company or something, that's foolish. That's not there are people in line to be in EVO's spot with Metaplanet right now. And when you look at the volume, like a lot of companies, if they're trying to issue shares, there's just not the volume. But with Metaplanet, there's so much volume, and EVO is so good at carefully selling these, not overselling on any single day. And we saw that early May. Just look at the chart. 101 million shares they sold in 11 trading days, and the stock went up essentially every day. And June 9th, 10th, and 11th, even at these higher prices, like $10 and $11, they were able to sell, almost 30 million shares the first 3 days that they got the green light to do so, and the market ate it up. So the proof is really in the pudding. Just look and see what's happening, and it's marvelous to sort of watch it unfold.
To drive home, like to add to your point, Climb, like the speed at which they're executing is just it's lightning speed right now. It's crazy, like ninja speed. Like everybody thought, oh, they're asleep at the wheel, nothing's happening until June 24th. But digging into the history, you can see that. We'll dig into that too. Like they have a history of not sleeping on their laurels and actually improving maybe on the execution as time goes by too, right?
Exactly.
Yeah. All of this before preferred shares. I see comments. Yes, that's right. Okay.
Yep.
So hey, we'll play this little clip here from Dylan. If everybody wants to sit tight, let's play the clip.
Think of the incentives for EVO and for Metaplanet issuing warrants at a premium to the market. It flips the dynamic the opposite. So what is the inverse of a death spiral moving strike warrant? Well, I don't have a name for it, but someone come up with one. That's what we issued. So the only way that equity is going to be sold is during strength, and there's a reflexive component where strength could beget more exercises. So this was a first in Japan. if you just looked up Metaplanet in Japanese characters on the day we announced it, the entire financial world was talking about this deal. 1, because of the scale, 2, because of the terms, 3, because of the reaction to both of them, which was limit up after hours. All three things, the scale, the terms, and the reaction, were completely unheard of and confounding to the Japanese capital markets.
So Dylan asked, what's the inverse of a debt spiral? Because in Japan, when companies issue warrants, usually they're trying to raise money because they're facing financial difficulties, but they're doing so by selling their shares at a discount into the market to raise money to pay for to pay the bills to keep the lights on, which is basically destroying shareholder value. And then the hedge funds, the short hedge funds, like pile in and start preying on the stock. It's like it's not good. But they've proven so far that every time they issue a round of warrants, a huge one, every round being bigger than the previous one, that they're experiencing the inverse of a death spiral. So what did we say, Klein? The people said that's inverse of a death spiral.
It's a volatility vortex.
Vitality vortex. There you go.
Oh, vitality vortex. That's better. Yeah.
That's funny. So that one cracked me up, actually. Christoph, shout out to you. Good job. I think you're not the only one who said that. There's a few. We were talking in private, like, hey, what's the inverse of that spiral, and then a vitality vortex. There you go. He's in the crowd. Good job.
Perfect.
Yeah, so that's awesome. Like the vitality vortex. So you hear that, Metaplanet? Keep taking us up the vitality vortex, and this is Mike's rendition of a vitality vortex. Pretty awesome. What do you think?
Yeah, that's cool. And I mean, yeah, this is the only company that, like, probably the only company in Japan that people want dilution, So it just, like, they're in a league of their own there.
Completely. Okay. This slide here is, we went back in time with Climb to look at previous rounds of warrants exercises and how they unfolded. And the one I want to point out is that they issued the bonds December. Yeah. So they actually, they issued, see, second paragraph here. The bonds were issued before the official exercises of the warrants. The proceeds stem from EVO's fund hedging activities from 3 million borrowed shares. That was pre-split, so 30 million, like 30 million in today post-split. So it's the same execution that they're doing. The bonds were issued before the official exercises of the warrant. Like, what did we just see today? Like a few hours ago, a bond being issued before the exercise of the warrant. So they're using that to just front run themselves and keep everything very tightly executed. Right? Do you have anything to say about this one, Klein?
Yeah, I mean, just exactly what you said. They're basically speed running this and signaling to the market, like showing the strength. You work with EVO, and they have a start date of June 24th, but the first 3 days that they're allowed to sort of front run that by borrowing 30 million shares from 2020 Ventures, 3 days in a row. Like, I mean, they could have spread it out, but they didn't. And I think the reason why is, like, they're showing the market how strong itself is, right? So the market is pushing. The market is the buyers that are pushing the price up slowly, having that buying pressure with volume. And EVO is on the other side of that, pushing down, to sell shares into it, right? And then, exercise the warrants, give that money to Metaplanet, and then Metaplanet goes out and buys Bitcoin, provides yield, and then now the price runs even more. So just the way that they're doing it, and the force that they're showing that is behind, like, all this volume, right? Because it's impressive what EVO is able to do, but the reason that's impressive is because of what the market is able to do in response to that.
To add to your point, like how strong that is, we saw in the previous slides that there were the short interest. If we estimate the flow to be about 300 million shares out of the 600 million outstanding, and the short interest would be about, like, close to 30%, which is, it's massive. That's massive short interest. Like on low floats, like when I traded small cap short stocks, like we'd be happy with like 10%, 15% short interest to we look for short squeeze, because the float is like so small, like there's no shares to go around, the price goes up, so a short squeeze, but then the shorts would come on the backside of the move to kind of prey on all the hype and everything. But this is not the same thing. This is this is not a short squeeze. There's just so much buying pressure that, as Climb said, they're able to just come in and sell like insane and still have this kind of price action that we see today, right? So good job, EVO. Good job. Okay, Climb, you want to talk about this? I know you dug this one up.
And this was going to be, I was talking about a lot of this stuff before Metaplanet did anything. Now they've already proven kind of the direction that they've gone, but we're still going to go through it to kind of show the breadcrumbs and show the consistency, and just all the stuff is pretty easy to find. Just look through their disclosures. The 210 million, it was a 21 million share plan back in late January that got announced. Post split, the split happened late March, I believe. So that's, now looking in retrospect, it's 210 million shares. But they announced that January 28th, and the start date was February 17th. So almost 3 weeks later. And then I think, let's see, so like the next two slides sort of go along with this. So there's that 3 week time frame. And then they buy Bitcoin on the 17th. The date's on there somewhere. I don't remember where it is.
You got it up top there.
Oh, perfect. Yeah. So they bought Bitcoin February 17th, day one. That would be similar to like if they had waited until June 24th this time around, like day one of the exercisability of the new warrants. Let's see. And then and that they bought like 269 Bitcoin there on that last slide. And they only had like 1,700 Bitcoin at a time. So, in one day they bought like 15% of what took them almost a year to accumulate. And I mean, we just saw something like that happen, within the last hour or so, which is super cool. Now, the way that they front ran it last time wasn't as clean as the way they front ran it this time. So last time they borrowed 4 billion yen, which was enough to buy about 270 Bitcoin. They borrowed it on February 11th. And then, the plan goes live where EVO can exercise the warrants February 17th. And then Metaplanet pays back like all of that. They pay back February 19th, they pay half of it back. February 21st, they pay back the other 2 billion yen.
Right.
So within 2 days and then 4 days of the plan going live, like they borrowed it beforehand so that day one they could like go in heavy, just to pull the future forward just by a couple of days. Like, but the situation before was that they didn't. This is my speculation, that they didn't want to buy the Bitcoin beforehand because they didn't have as secure of a setup as they have this time around. So before, they didn't have the clause where EVO could borrow the shares beforehand with sort of like a day one exercise price to be able to really lock that in and guarantee that Metaplanet is going to be able to harvest that mNAV before the day one of the exercise, like before, what was February 17th, if that makes sense. So I think that they kept the cash on hand and didn't pull the trigger on Bitcoin until February 17th, because if a bear market, if something crazy happened at the very worst time for them, they didn't want to be in an awkward situation where they couldn't pay back this bond, which was a 6-month bond. If mNAV had gone to 1 or something crazy happened, they didn't want to get themselves in a pinch. So they waited, I think, until they could see what the mNAV was, that, things were going to go well for the first few days of this plan, for the 210 million plan. And then they executed and announced that. That's just my speculation, but so it's pretty neat, just again seeing how they pulled the future forward before, and then seeing even how this setup is that much better.
Did you when we talked yesterday about this, like you said something about Mario?
Oh yeah, I can't remember how I said it, but yeah, I mean it's kind of like strategy made the Super Mario Brothers, the first game, right? Like it's kind of like strategy made it. And then Metaplanet is like, oh, that's a cool game. Let's speed run it and like just practice the crap out of it. And now they're speed running Mario.
Yeah.
So I mean, we're seeing it happen. It's really cool to see, especially at their size now. It's really neat.
Yeah, there is such a thing as a second mover advantage. So first mover advantage would be like a strategy. Be having the biggest moat, like the largest hodl in the entire space. 500 plus, close to 600 now, and that's the first mover advantage, right? They move so early and so hard early on that they were able to accumulate that hodl and build that. The second mover advantage, though, is being able to learn from the experience of the first mover and kind of seeing what happened. If they ran into any pitfalls in their execution and improve on all of that. So yeah, Metaplanet has a different environment to operate in. Like Japan's not the same, and they can't do the ATM and stuff. But actually, they were able to. What if you look at Japan? Like they're unable to do an ATM. They had to kind of reverse engineer the whole thing around. Like think of Dylan's video with Tim Kotzman, which is very, very good. If you haven't watched it, I really, really recommend it. And they had to reverse and engineer a way to do an ATM because there's no ATM facility in Japan. But this actually, not only did they reverse engineer an ATM for themselves in Japan via the warrants, but it's actually improved, in our opinion, in execution because they're able to, their partner EVO has a vested interest at selling only in strength, because if they sell in weakness, then there's no profit for them to be made there. Yeah. Okay. All right. So before today came around, before our models got destroyed, Climb and I, we put this thing together over the weekend. So we had two scenarios. So remember we talked about EVO having access to the borrow pool of 30 million, and they also have 19 million of their own shares. So we came up with 4 different scenarios. Scenario 1, they sell 30 million shares early on, and no bond, no front running a bond to Metaplanet. Like they just wait until the 24th, exercise the warrants to reload the warrants, give the money to Metaplanet. Metaplanet turns around and buys 2,500 shares on January 24th. So the same scenario, but with a bond being offered right now, which is maybe that's what's happening currently, is scenario number 3. Okay. So scenario number 2 is no bond and unloading the full clip, 49 million shares total, and then turning around and exercising warrants and giving all of that to Metaplanet, and then getting the 4,500 buy on day 1 of the warrants of the plan. And scenario number 4 is the same, but just adding a bond in right now. So I actually, I still think number 4 could happen. I was rooting for number 4, basically getting front running the bond, which we're seeing a bond today. So and then I think the 19 million shares are going to go down to, like, they're going to be unloaded between now and the 24th, and then we're going to see more buys, maybe totaling to about 4,500 total. What do you think, Climb? What's your take?
Yeah, I mean, it's 3 or 4 now with the bond. And I'm guessing this probably won't be their only bond. It might be, but I'm not sure why they would only do it like halfway, unless there's an advantage to them for some reason. But the 19 million shares that EVO owns, I'm not sure, how often they update that data as far as the large shareholders. We're able to see the shares shorted pretty quick, and we saw that they've shorted over 26 million of the 30 million already days ago, right? A few days ago they did that. They've probably done all 30 million at this point.
Yeah.
And we'll find out soon. But for the 19 million they're holding, I'm not sure how often like Bloomberg terminals update that, the reporting requirements of that in Japan. I honestly have no clue. So that's, it'd be something else to dig into.
Let's also a reminder for those 19 million shares. We don't know the cost basis, but it could be, if they do good on the warrants right now, come the 24th, my personal speculation is that they could be even selling those shares, maybe, and Metaplanet gets none of that money because that's their own shares, right? They own them, so EVO gets the money, but they could turn around and package that into a bond, and then give more to Metaplanet that way as a gesture of good faith. But that's just speculation. If Dylan, if you're watching this and I'm right, blink twice. All right, I think that's it. Okay, so gotta update this now, right?
Yeah, definitely needs to some update on the meme. And again, looking at that, and of course now we have to update the holdings as well because they have 10,000. So, and someone said in the chat earlier, so they passed Coinbase now as of an hour or two ago, and now they only need 2,800 it looks like, and 31 Bitcoin additionally. Some of that will come from that bond that they just announced too. But I mean, they'll probably within like the next 10 days, 10 to 12 days, I would guess, they'll be in 5th place. I mean, I think it's going to happen before July 1st. I unless they're waiting for like a Monday to announce the Bitcoin purchase or something like that. But yeah, we're going to be in 5th soon, and then it's a matter of taking out Riot, and then I'm pretty sure we're going to pass up XXI and Marathon later this year too. But we'll see how that goes.
Jake in the audience, he says Tesla is next. Climb, do you just notice? I just noticed on the next to Tesla. Do you see those icons?
Lettuce hands. Yeah, I saw the icons, but it didn't click when I saw that earlier. That's funny. Wow.
Oh yeah, the lettuce handed, because I think they bought some. They had 11,000, like over 12,000 or so, and then they sold some to like test liquidity of Bitcoin. Like, okay. Something like
Exactly.
that.
Yeah.
Yeah. So all these holders, like Climb said, are static. They're not. Well, I think CleanSpark they're mining, so they're not static. But Coinbase HODL, I don't know if HODL's like accumulating, but Coinbase, Tesla for sure. Coinbase just got passed. Tesla's next. I will. What did we do? Climb last episode. We said like how many? 4 or 5 we wanted.
Yeah, 5. Yeah, there's not enough doors on that picture.
Yeah, so I'll hold off on updating the meme. Metaplanet, if you're listening to this, I'll hold off on updating the meme. Like if we can make it to number 5, as Climb says, by July 1st or mid-July, then I'll update the meme and I'll put the 5 names on the door as promised.
Yeah, it's so cool just thinking about them being at 13, 14,000 or whatever around July 1st, and then think about like, okay, what does the end of July look like? And if the number 20,000 doesn't pop into your head when I ask that question, look at the numbers again. Like that's all I can say. I mean, just look at those 3 days when they've sold already. June 9th, 10th, and 11th. They sold an average of about 9 million shares per day. At a price that Metaplanet will get around $10 for those shares. So that's like, what is that, like, almost 900 Bitcoin a day in shares that were sold to the market that they'll be able to buy, right? So that's when they're able to sell those shares 3 days in a row like that, it's a little less than 900. So let's say 800 Bitcoin equivalent a day from that selling pressure. Yeah. Give them a month and see what they can do. Mm-hmm. So, I mean, these prices we haven't seen before. We haven't seen them dilute at these prices before, except for those 3 days, a few days ago. So yeah, give them July and let's see what can happen.
Yeah, we'll see. 5 names on the door. Let's make it happen. All right, Clem, you want to talk about this?
Oh yeah. So maybe 2 days ago or so, Simon announced that there's going to be, so there's always a general shareholders meeting in March, I believe, for Metaplanet. And certain things, have to be approved. Like you have to get shareholders together to vote, to approve, whatever. And I'm not that familiar with how Japan does it, but they have a meeting, every year. When they call an extra meeting, it's, for a very specific reason. And in this disclosure, they don't say why yet. They say like kind of to be, we'll let everyone know at some point, right? Basically, once they have all the information out there, then they'll spread it. But September 1st, they're going to have another one of those meetings. So an extraordinary meeting of shareholders, whatever it's called, something like that. And we know that the reason would be, like, the main reason would be that they're even just by announcing this meeting, they're signaling the strength of the speed run. They, 6 months to me seems like a pretty easy challenge for them to have all these 555 million shares sold in 6 months, just looking at how May went and looking at how the 3 days in June have gone. And so, yeah, I think that this is a huge sign of strength that they're doing it. And during the meeting, almost certainly they'll expand the share count. The sort of upper limit of the share count right now is 1.6 billion shares. And that's not how many exist. Like the fully diluted is only 750 million or so. But the 1.6 billion is just how many they're able to go up to based on the last shareholder vote, essentially. Like without another shareholder vote, they're able to 4x their, I don't know if it's their outstanding or their fully diluted shares, but they're able to 4x sort of the current number whenever the shareholders get together to vote on it. And so almost for sure that will happen at the time, just to give them more wiggle room after this 555 plan is done.
Yeah. I think it's fully diluted, the 4x.
Okay. And yeah, so and if that's the case, I mean, at the time, there will be they could expand it to give them enough wiggle room so that they won't have to worry about that for quite some time. So it's really just making sure that that doesn't ever get in the way and cause a delay on sort of the release of another plan. And then, a few of us have also speculated that the other reason might be announcement of preferred shares, like a vote on issuing preferred shares. That's pure speculation, and my stance on that is if they decide to do it later, it's for a good reason. If they decide to do it sooner, it's for a good reason. I trust their execution, so I'll just be excited no matter what they do.
Yeah. I think it should. My personal opinion is that they should. I mean, they should focus on the build and the hodl, and then later in the preferred. But yeah, whatever they do is that's fine by me too. Does it mean that we're going to see you in Tokyo?
Oh, I mean, I would love to go to the March meeting. I doubt that I'll go to the September one. I don't think it's going to be like nearly as fun. It's more, strictly business. I think as you mentioned earlier, but yeah, we'll see. I'll try to make it to one of them.
All right. Does that mean that if you go to the March meeting and we book a room in the hotel, like we can like jump on the bed like the Pepes?
That's right. Yeah, that was a good meme.
All right. So yeah, shareholder meeting in September. See you guys there. Climb said Josh is coming after you apparently.
Yeah, I think he holds 1 million shares already. He might be over that now. I'm not sure. So.
All right, he's coming for you. Okay, this goes to this is what you were talking about. All right, so let's dive into Climb's models a little bit. Why don't you walk us through your work here?
Yeah, it's always a challenge because you can divide it up a million different ways. And so what I call strong bull, base, and bear case, like I kind of have 4 different cases here. That's not like me saying it can only go these 4 ways, or even that's my personal feeling of what these necessarily look like. But I tried to fit like I'm probably personally, I think the base case, like for me, is probably somewhere between what you'll see in a minute here, between the base and the bull case, is probably sort of my personal base case. But I understand that I'm biased, and so I try to take that bias out when I make these. I guess is what I'm trying to say. So you can see their historic share count increase, and that's in millions of shares up to today. And then what I've drawn out is sort of the curve that my model produces when I look at a lot more dilution happening sooner and sort of tapering off of that as they hold more Bitcoin, as they become, higher price, I think, per share. If they're $50 a share, they're probably not going to be able to sell 10 million shares to the market a day very easily. Like if they can, that's great. But, so I just wanted to kind of put some reality in there. Like they're going to sell more earlier on, in my opinion, and it might be the same amount of shares sort of monthly, but it's going to be less of a percentage. But we'll see how that goes. So I have the end of 2025 for the strong bull and the bull case, selling the full 555 million shares. And then for the base and the bear case, I have that ending in the end of March next year. Yeah, and I don't really see unless something really crazy happens, I don't really see it taking longer than that. Let's see what's next. So to go along, and these are the way that I do these models is there's a bunch of different ones there's a bunch of different graphs that all interlink. So the model, the volume, the share count climb is the first part of it. Then the mNAV, all of my models always have mNAV dropping over time. I think that that's a reasonable handicap to put on these models. And so the strong bull I have going from a 6 to a 4. The bull I have going from a 6 down to a 3 by the end of the year. The base goes from a 5 to a 3.5, and the bear goes from a 4 to a 2.5. So just think about as they're selling all these shares, they're being, less of a premium as time goes on. And I'm not saying that's going to happen. I just try to make that an extra sort of restriction because I'm not going to say 7 mNAV. I'm not going to say 8. And I'm like, as part of my model, unless we're sitting there, if we're already sitting there, then sure. The 6 mNAV, keep in mind that the 30 million shares that they've essentially already, that's already signed, sealed, and it's about to be delivered, June 24th. That's already, I think, slightly over 6 mNAV that they've already locked in for the first 5% of this plan. So, I think that the strong bull isn't even that crazy here. It's going to look crazier when you put everything together, but I mean, that's how it maths when you put all this together. So when you look at the Bitcoin, people won't believe these numbers, run the numbers, yourself. But when you look at the amount of Bitcoin that I think that they'll hold based on those other factors, and keep in mind, this is less than a doubling of the share count. And the Super Bowl case would put them at 221,000 Bitcoin this year, 2025. And that's their end of year 2027 goal, close to that 210, right? Even the bull case shows almost 200,000 Bitcoin at the end of this year. A lot of people do models. You'll see people do models and post them. A lot of people do them monthly. Don't do them monthly. Do them weekly. People have asked me, and that's the feedback I give them. So do them weekly, and the reason is they tend to dilute, 2 or 3 days out of the week, let's say, and then they tend to buy Bitcoin about once a week when they have a plan like this going on. And mNAV has to sort of catch up. Go ahead.
Yeah, I think you should elaborate more on your weekly point because it's like when you think about compounding a loan, the compounding of a loan or something like monthly, daily, it's completely different, right? If they can, weekly is a much stronger cycle, right, than monthly, right?
That's right. Yeah, it's exactly that. And if you're trading at 6 mNAV at $10, and then a week later they provide yield that makes the 5.9 mNAV now is $11, so a lower mNAV is actually a higher price. The market sort of has to catch up to that. And it means that then when they sell shares the following week, as long as mNAV is about the same, maybe just a little bit lower, I mean, they're making more per share and they can buy more Bitcoin with that. And that compounding that you talked about, it's super important. If you do it daily, that's probably too extreme. That's not really the reality. The market needs a little bit of time to catch up, and they don't buy Bitcoin every day, or at least they don't announce it every day, and the yield really only happens when they announce it. When it's visible to us, when the market's aware of it. So, even the bear case here ends up with 80,000 Bitcoin, and another okay. So 2 things here. One, I put this is on a log chart, and you can see, and the reason I included history is because I wanted people to see how ridiculous this looks. And I'm not saying the model's wrong. I'm just saying what this implies, them selling 555 million shares in about the next 6 months, or even a little bit longer, really implies that I'm pretty confident they are going to break out of this exponential growth of their Bitcoin holdings to the upside. They're going to slow after that, at some point, but during the length of this plan, I think that they're going to be above their general trend line on this, and people are going to be surprised. Like, a lot of my previous models went with them just kind of staying as long as they could, along this line and then tapering off. But when you try to fit 555 million shares in, interesting things happen. And, even if you tried to sell, not everyone has to run these models. Like, do if you want to. It's fun for me. It's not fun for everyone. It's homework for some people. But if you try to imagine that they were able to sell all of those shares right now, and we would not want them to at today's price, because they can sell a lot of the shares later on at much higher prices, I think. And that's sort of the whole point. But even if they sold all 555 million at like $10, that's enough for them to go out and buy. I mean, that earns them around $5 billion. And that's enough for them to go out and buy another 50,000 Bitcoin. And that would put them at 60,000 Bitcoin if they just sold all of them at the price that they're already able to sell them at right now before they even bake in any of this yield. So the real question, if you just want to like forego the model and just simplify the math in your head, just say, okay, they like every $10 of stock price equals about 50,000 Bitcoin on this plan. So if you think that the average price during this plan, the average sale price that they'll get is going to be around $20, well, that's enough for them to buy 100,000 Bitcoin, and I mean, for the simple math, just imagine Bitcoin price staying the same. Obviously, everything sort of shifts up as a ratio if Bitcoin goes up. I see that as a good thing if that happens, but yeah, that's the way to simplify it. And, so how do they get to 200,000 Bitcoin? Well, the average sale price has to be around $40 for these shares. Right now we're at $10. I think we're going to go a lot higher, and then a lot of these shares are going to sell for a lot more than $10. But yeah, my reality is sort of somewhere between the base and the bull there. And even the base case has us ending up with almost 150,000 Bitcoin. And like, at the end of next March, at the end of next March, and then like 107,000 at the end of this year. And I don't think anyone really expects this, but
Nope.
Try the math on your own, see how it goes.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, consistently exceeding expectations. I saw a comment from Voyager. Yes, they have. Execution has been very tight, even better than they announced. They're like, sometimes you run simulations on the computer and it's fully optimized, and you're like, there's no way you can beat this optimized case scenario. Well, they seem to be beating the optimized case scenarios, as calculated by computers, so by models. That's pretty
Exactly.
cool. Yeah.
Yeah, the stars have aligned, and their volume is staying stronger than ever, and they're executing better than ever. So I think this is their strongest growth phase is being kicked off right now. It's not in the past. I mean, the past was great, but what's about to happen is going to blow people's minds. So this is, kind of what everyone wants to see, I think. And so this is taking all those numbers, and for the Super Bowl and the bull case, I just estimated that Bitcoin would be 200,000 at the end of this year. So if you agree with my model but don't agree on the Bitcoin price, just change the ratio of the price, right? So like, the Super Bowl case, I have us ending up at $152 at the end of this year, based on everything you saw, mNAV dropping, taking 6 months to do this plan. And again, that's with Bitcoin almost doubling. So let's say if it stayed at 100,000, then that Super Bowl case prediction would be at like, $76 per share or something like that. So that's where some of this gets, quite a kicker, is just imagining that Bitcoin goes up as well in price. But yeah, even with the base case is Bitcoin going to 125,000, not changing by very much, and mNAV starting at 5 and going down to 3.5 for all of these shares they're selling. Well, we're already above that because they're already selling 5% of their plan at 6 mNAV, at over 6 mNAV. But yeah, the base case has Bitcoin not moving much and us still ending up at the end of the plan, at around, $56 or something like that. The bear case is interesting because you have Bitcoin going down a little bit, down to 100K, 100K. The mNAV starting, and this is the real handicap for the bear case, is that starting at 4, them never being able to sell higher than a 4 mNAV, which again, they've already done for the first 5% of this plan, and it drifting down to 3 the whole time. Actually, I think I have it drifting down to 2.5, but from that other slide. But even then, you end up with a price of $17 at the end of the plan, which right now doesn't sound very high. It sounded a lot higher when we're at $2, I guess. But that's still quite a return. When you look at being a leveraged play on Bitcoin going down, us handicapping with a much lower mNAV than we have today and dropping even lower, just putting everything together, it's amazing that even with that, you end up with a higher price. I'm not saying there's no way that price can go down. Obviously, price can do whatever it wants. But when you model everything out, these are the curves you get. So, and again, weekly is definitely the way to go. I think that's like the best time frame to break down these models. Here is a view of this, which is also super important, I think. The Bitcoin, I don't really think in yield math gets really confusing. If you just sort of imagine that Metaplanet had provided 100% yield, and then if you say, okay, well, how much yield will they have provided if you add 50% more yield? The answer is not 150. And it's like if Tesla stock starts at $100 and goes up 100%, gives you 100% yield, now it's at $200. If it goes up an additional 50%, now you're at 300. So, you got 100% yield, and then you got a 50% yield, and that equates to a 200% yield. So the math gets really confusing if you just kind of think about the yield numbers and try to like multiply them together and stuff. You have to add one, like you have to be careful with what you're doing to add that 100% back, in the right place. So the way that I avoid that is to just, anything but short term, I look at the multiplication of their current Bitcoin per share. So compared to today's Bitcoin per share, I guess, before they announced that last buy a few, 2 hours ago or so, you have the end of the plan, the Super Bowl, them ending up with 11 times their current Bitcoin per share, versus, like the 7 or so mNAV that we're trading at, and that's an 11x return on the Bitcoin per share. The bull case is about a 10. And again, this is totally separated from Bitcoin price. It doesn't matter what Bitcoin price is. That's where the multiple goes based on yield. And then even for the base and the bear case, you end up with a significant return. You have less Bitcoin, you have less yield, you have a little bit more friction selling at a lower mNAV, but you still end up with a pretty crazy multiplication of their current Bitcoin per share. This is not me showing off my model. I'll show off my model with the charts and try to make them pretty or whatever. But this is just because people have asked. So here's just a picture of sort of how I set things up in Excel. So people can just, pause it if they care and just sort of see what I'm doing. If I made any mistakes, please let me know. I've been over this a bunch of times, but you can see how I have like the mNAV column is in the middle and it starts with 6, and every single week I have it dropping. So, every single week you can see the 1 mNAV share price next to it, and the share count, the weekly yield, the weekly dilution, all that stuff. So, if anyone wants, like, this is just one idea. It's worked well for me, so feel free to copy.
All right. The part that we both love, you and I, Theta gang, selling puts. So
right.
This is Climb digging through this. I believe this was a storm research report that was published in April, like the 25-page report, 15-page report, if I'm not
That's
mistaken.
right.
Yeah. So we were wondering actually last time after the first episode with Climb, we were talking about the new income generation business that Metaplanet is exploring, executing, meaning, the hotel is now a side business, is a side gig. The main income now comes from selling put options on Bitcoin. So just a little recap for those of you who are not aware, like selling puts on Bitcoin, what does that mean? It means like you're selling insurance. So you're selling insurance on Bitcoin tanking, the price of Bitcoin tanking. So somebody on the other side of the trade wants to insure, they have Bitcoin, they want to insure the Bitcoin. It's like insuring a car. So they pay a fee to the seller of the put. The seller keeps that fee no matter what, and they have an agreement that if the Bitcoin price tanks below a certain price at a certain specific date, and the contract expires in the money, then the seller of the put, they took the premium. Now they're obligated to pay and buy that Bitcoin at the agreed price from that buyer, right? So it's like, think of it like car insurance. But we were wondering if with Climb, if that Bitcoin was going to be, if it was meant to acquire Bitcoin that way, or if it was meant just as a pure income play. And we think, just by reading the statement again, this research report again, that it's actually two separate buckets. So there's the Bitcoin HODL that's on one side, and then the Bitcoin that may be acquired via selling put options on Bitcoin. If they are assigned the contract, if they are put the Bitcoin, then they would segregate that into their income vault, if you will. And what you can do once that happens is you can turn around and you own the Bitcoin now. You can sell a covered call. So you sell the right for the buyer of that call to, if the call goes in the money, to execute the contract and take possession of the Bitcoin. So you agree to sell the Bitcoin at a certain price to the buyer if the contract goes in the money a specific date, expires in the money. So we think that if they are assigned the Bitcoin from that report, they would go around and sell a covered call, which is basically we call that the wheel in options. You're running the wheel, so you sell puts, sell put, sell put, sell put. You get assigned a Bitcoin, and then you hold the Bitcoin now. You turn around, you sell a covered call above your cost basis. You sell covered call, covered call, covered call, until it's expires in the money, and the Bitcoin is taken away from you, and you get the money for the Bitcoin. So that's called running the wheel, and we think that that's how they would be running that. And you had also another speculation, Climb, like, let us hear it, that if they're assigned the Bitcoin and they hold on to it for a while.
I don't know if I remember. I know that it looks like they might actually be making as much as 40% on this. But what was the part you're talking about? I'm not sure.
I think you said that if they're assigned a Bitcoin, they may, and then if they hold it for a while in that operating portfolio, like they may after a while just decide to move some to the HODL.
To the HODL.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm sure they do. And I think they try to keep something like 5% of their sort of raised like how much capital they've raised. You could probably think of 5% of just their current Bitcoin holdings as sort of an easy way to do the math. I think they can do more if they want to, like maybe up to 10% or something. I don't know if they're like restricted. It's probably just whatever they want to do. But yeah, they're essentially doing the wheel strategy and earning as much as some people have estimated something like 40% a year. So in some years, this portion that's just off to the side that's earning income is actually going to outperform, percentage-wise their Bitcoin holdings. So it's really neat. It definitely outperforms in a sideways market for sure, and then in a down market, of course, it outperforms as well. So it's just neat seeing that they're able to do this and how well they've executed in the past too.
Okay, very good. Let's see. I think, hold on, there's a couple questions from the audience here. Let me try and field them, see if we can answer them between you and I. Do you see them splitting again? And if so, at what point? So there's a weird rule about selling, how do you call it? How Japanese citizens are able to buy stocks in their thing. And I think we should probably ask Jake that question, because I'm not we're not in Japan. We don't know.
Yes.
But yeah, you go ahead. Go ahead.
Yeah, well, the part that I know that I believe, like Jake and others have said, is that they're restricted to buying 100 at a time, kind of like with options in the U.S. Like one contract represents 100 sort of the underlying. But like within their NISA accounts, I've heard that they're able to put in around $15,000 a year into those sort of savings / investment / tax-free accounts. And if you think about that, and then imagine like them having to buy either 0 shares or 100 shares, like they have to buy in multiples of 100 shares. So even right now, that's that's quite a lot. I mean, at $12, we're probably well above that right now, but at like $12, that's a decent chunk of their whole account. So $1,200 per, and historically they've done the split. It looks like around like the $30 to $45 range. So that's kind of when I would expect for them to do it again, because it's in everyone's best interest for a split to happen. When it just starts getting way too costly for investor. Okay, Jake said, yeah, 16,600 per year. Yeah, it just gets way too costly to try to buy, to make the decision to buy 100 shares. Like if it's like, $60, that's like a huge obligation. And so if you wanted just a portion of your NISA investment to go to that, it's like, well, I guess I'll just not do it because it's too much, right? So they'll probably do the split again when we hit, I think someone else said around 4,000 to 6,000 yen.
Yeah, it looks like
yeah, go ahead.
It looks like that's a consensus in the crowd, like 4,000, 6,000. I remember when Dylan said that when they first executed the reverse split, like a lot of people got mad because for that same reason, but in reverse, right? Because they were able to buy other shares.
It was trading at like 25 yen or something. So like every yen, like they don't have decimals. So every yen was like 4%. So that's like not good. Yeah.
Yeah. Then when the reverse split, I think everybody was mad because I think for two reasons. One, they have to put up more money to buy 100, and also because the shareholder, you get shareholder benefits by holding like a lot of stocks in Japan, but you have to be above a certain threshold, I think, or something like that. And so people got mad.
Yeah, that's funny.
Yeah. Okay, what else? Let's see what else questions were being asked. Could you please put the charts also in yen for those running or dealing with 3350? That's a suggestion for you in the future, I guess, Climb, on the models. If you could just have like a embedded conversion in yen at what, 150, 144 yen per dollar. I don't know. Could be.
That's a good idea. I'll try to make a thread either tonight or tomorrow and just have sort of like the yen version of the charts as well.
Okay, yeah. Somebody says basically we have a shot at more than 100 billion market cap by end of year in dollars. Yep.
Yeah, exactly. And that's why I posted recently, I think Metaplanet becomes a top 10 stock in Japan, I think is around the 100 billion point. I could be wrong, but that's what I found earlier. And I think the top company in Japan is closer to like a 300 billion cap. So I expect Metaplanet to hit the top 10 in Japan like sooner than Strategy hits the top 10 in the US. Obviously, that's just like a friendly sort of competition in my head. Like, I don't need it to, I don't want Strategy to be crushed or anything like that. Like a rising tide lifts all boats. And I've said a lot about that in the past, but, I do think that will probably happen. And I think that Metaplanet's going to hit #1 in Japan sooner as well. And those things could happen, way before people expect them to.
Yeah, I think the model here with Metaplanet is you have to keep expecting for your expectations to be crushed.
Yeah, in a good way. Yeah,
in a good way, like crush to the upside, like right tail, not left tail, like to the upside. #1 in Japan, #2 HODL. I think they're going to be #2 HODL too. In sooner than we think, sooner than we can conceptualize. There's actually, I think, a bet going on. I think is it Christina and like a British HODL or something, that she's like, what, somebody poked the other. I think he poked her first, and he's like, oh, they're never gonna make it to #2. And then she's like, yeah, or I'll bet you $1,000 on it. And she's like, yeah, I'll bet you $1,000. I'm like, yeah, sign me up too. So are you in the bet, Climb?
No, I'm not in the bet, but I'm gonna have some popcorn and watch it play out. And I'm just gonna keep my money with Metaplanet and some cash. Obviously, I have cash too, but keep my money with Metaplanet, and I think I'll have less risk and more reward with those dollars anyway. So, but I'll be entertained.
You still think they're gonna make it to #2?
Oh, I think they'll hit #2 on that public company chart this year.
But you won't take the bet.
No, I won't take the bet, because if the bet pays off, then my money's better not taking the bet. It's better just investing in the stock.
All right, so you're so bullish you're so confident in the bet winning
But
that
I'm
you're
not
not
taking
going to
that.
take
Yeah,
the bet.
that's right. Yeah.
All right.
Yeah.
That was a good one. Yeah, I think I'm with you, Christina. Let's do it. All right. What else? What else do we have? Let me see the other question. There was one more, I think. When do we lose the over-the-counter status? That's a good question. I think we're all waiting on that. I mean, some people have tried asking Dylan and Simon at the Bitcoin conference here, but we don't want to probe too much because it'll be like they say, like it'll be ready when it's ready, right? But there's a lot of regulatory requirements. I think they could be listed in NASDAQ way before NYSE, and they have enough market cap and all of that. They may just need some meet some governance requirements, but I'm sure they're working on it. Like they know they already have, we have MTPL HODL on top of the Japanese listing, so they're aware of the volume and the demand here, and especially recently here in the West, like how viral the stock has become. So I'm sure they want to do it sooner than later, but it may be clogged up by a little bit of red tape or so. What's your thoughts on that, Climb?
Yeah, I mean, it's as far as I understand it, it's largely sort of up to them, but I think that it's a risk versus reward sort of thing, and they're not in a hurry to do it. They're not having trouble selling shares, and that's their main execution today. Eventually it'll maybe be preferreds, but right now it's the equivalent of their ATM, and all the new U.S. money that's coming in is great, and I'm sure that they appreciate it. But like as far as volume numbers, most of the 3350 volume, and that's what they're shorting, selling shares into through EVO Fund, like that's happening for the most part without U.S. investors. I have some 3350 and other people trade it too, but like, a lot of that is just raw Japanese excitement. And, I think by them not uplisting, they're showing that how strong they are essentially, and they'll uplist when they want to, and I'm ready for it. I wouldn't be surprised if it happens within the next year, but I have no real information there.
So Chris is asking, any chance they're holding off on uplisting to avoid getting an options market? I thought about that because right now the stock has such high volatility, implied and historical, both. We've seen what happens, and with strategy and the whole MSTY covered call ETF coming in and selling massive call walls above the money, and I don't know how much of it is reality, like that it's killing the IV on the strategy stock, but I do want options on Metaplanet, but part of me is also sleeping well, just buying the stock and not doing anything, because sometimes I'm sure you've experienced that too. Like when we keep trying to adjust the options or tinkering with the options, like we kind of mess things up. We can mess things up. So I kind of enjoy the no options environment right now. I don't really need it. I have strategy for that. I have a position in strategy. What's your take on the options market on Metaplanet Climb?
Yeah, I mean, sure, like the guilty pleasure part of me wants them to have an options market right now. It's it's like ice cream. It's fun, but I also know that it's so much easier. And like if someone throws out, or like my models, if someone's takeaway from my model is that they feel like I guaranteed or something that we're going to hit $100 by the end of this year, which is not the case, even though my personal feeling is that I think we'll probably land somewhere between the $50 and $100 mark at the end of this year. But that's just my math, my model, and I'm just putting my money where my mouth and conviction are. But if they had an options market and someone saw my charts, I would feel a lot worse about sharing them. And the reason is that if people thought that what I was saying is that we are going to $100 this year, whatever, they would go out and buy $80 strike call options. And then if we close the year at $75, then they just lost all that money. And instead, if someone owns the stock today, at $12 or whatever. And if it doesn't go to 100, if it only goes to 75 or 50 or 40 or 20, they still make money. Like, you don't get burned with that theta decay. And that's what I like about sharing these models and stuff. And if they had an options market, I would be a lot more reluctant to share them.
Yeah, that's a good take. We think a lot of us here were actually in a strategy trade, and it's back in November, and the euphoria, the ramp up, and then the IV crush afterwards was pretty brutal. So yep. Options are double-edged swords. Okay, I think this slide's good. Let's see what we have next. Oh yeah.
Oh yeah.
Go ahead.
Yeah, I forgot about this one. So yeah, this is a little hard. I hate making charts that take people like a minute or two to really see what's going on. So I apologize for that, but there's just a lot to see here. This is just the cleanest way I could show it. But this is showing, of course, before today. Now they're in 9th, but they were in 10th. So it's showing a ratio of Metaplanet's Bitcoin holdings compared to everyone except for strategy, because they're orders of magnitude, apart from most of these other players. So everyone that's in front of them on that sort of public company listing, ordered by the most Bitcoin to the least, right? So they were in 10th. Well, they were in 11th a couple weeks ago. Then they hit 10th. Now they're in 9th. And this ratio, as each one of these different colored lines goes to 100%, that means that Metaplanet holds more Bitcoin than that company that ratio represents, right? So you can see all of these are going up and to the right. And, we'll see. XXI is probably the biggest wild card because they haven't really got things going. I have my doubts about the speed that they'll be able to execute. But we'll see how that goes. You just don't have a whole lot of history there to judge them on. But yeah, I think that, this shows, like, if everything just fit inside these arrows, that Metaplanet would be in 2nd place. It looks like late October, something like that. And a lot of people don't think it'll happen this year. So going back to that, will Metaplanet be number 2 bet? Like, I think it could actually happen in October. It could even happen before, because my model actually shows that I think they're about to break out on their exponential curve and go even faster. But I'm ready to be surprised and ready to sort of continue this graph and see where it goes.
Yeah, we'll keep our graphs updated with short interest and EVO activity, and then this model too here, your ratio. That's a good chart, actually. To add to your point of 21, they're coming out with such a big hodl in the first place. I think 42,000. That
Yeah. Yep.
it's gonna be and we don't know. I don't know. At least I don't know. Maybe somebody knows in the crowd and can let me know. But I don't know by which mechanism they're gonna try and they're gonna acquire more. But 42K is such a huge number to start with. Like, if you want to do like a 25%, like you're talking like about 10K add up on the first go. That's a big ask. So I don't know. I don't know.
For me, the companies need to either have tons of potential by not having much Bitcoin, or a lot of history. And that's why I like Metaplanet, because it has, to me, the perfect combination of both. You have 14 months of now 37 different announced Bitcoin purchases as of today, in a very clean exponential growth line, right? Very consistent. I can sort of extrapolate into the future, but they're also small enough that, as you saw from the models earlier, like, I still fully expect them to 10x their current Bitcoin per share. And even if it doesn't happen in the next 6 months, like I think, okay, well then, 1 or 2 years,
Exactly.
like that would still be great. So
yeah. It bears to repeat that besides MicroStrategy, sorry, I can never get used to this. The second longest established track record for executing this kind of strategy is Metaplanet. So
yeah, to any degree at all. That's
of consistency, not just like a one-time buy or couple, like Tesla, a few buys and one sell and then nothing else, like, or Coinbase, like half baked, like consistently accruing, increasing Bitcoin per share and Bitcoin yield. So that's Metaplanet. And 1 year, it was, I think, a bit of a more of a wild card in the early days, as is any company. Like you see a lot of them popping up now. It was a bit more of a wild card in the early days, but I think since like midsummer or after the summer 2024, like it's been de-risked completely. Actually, like right in line with when they shot up to, remember they shot up to that 72% leverage ratio after that first like bond they did. And then afterwards you can see the leverage ratio decreasing a little bit. So that was a kind of like, okay, but then they got to work with the moving strike warrants to pay back that obligation when working with EVO. And after they started deleveraging, I think at that point, once they had reached below 10% again, was like, okay, now this is like they're a lot more of a safe and sure bet than in the early days, But some people are in positions from like April 2024. I think Jake is in there from April 2024, and yeah, that's awesome, for to get that kind of entry, that kind of exposure early on.
Yeah.
Okay. Do you have anything else to add, Mr. Klein?
No, I think that's pretty much it.
I'm reusing the slide from last time because I really don't know where we're going to go next. But all right, I think this concludes it. I want to thank everybody for joining in the stream. Just come by the Discord. I think we've advertised for like 5 or 6 times here. Thank you, Mr. Dojo Voyager, for doing that. Thank you, Mr. Borg, for sitting behind the stage, backstage with us and dealing with everything. Happy Father's Day. Yes, to all 2- and 4-legged papas. Thank you, Mr. Onin, for that. Happy Father's Day. What else? Let us know on the Discord what you would like, what you liked, what you didn't like, what you would like to see next. Smash that like button, subscribe, follow on X, all that stuff. I will put the name of the song in the show notes because I think all of you want to go out right now, turn off the stream and go rage. So I'll do that. So yeah, thank you, everybody. We will see you next time. We don't know when the dojo will strike again, but when it does, you'll get the signal.